And we are live. Good morning. Welcome to the Zero Content Show. I'm joined today with Taylor Palmer and Jordan Bowman of UXTools, designers in your own rights. I think both of you are in the design lead level, having worked for the last 10 years or so. And we'll get into your backgrounds a little bit. But I'm really excited to talk with you guys about kind of side hustles and creating things as designers and balancing that and what it takes for success and all kinds of stuff. I have a really special place in my heart for designers, for creators in general, but really specifically for showing designers that you can be product builders beyond just like, I design stuff. Because I think there's a lot of really great examples out there. And I think that it's also one of the spooky ventures that you can get into as a designer that really improves your ability to be a good designer. You look at like Brian Chesky, Airbnb, you look at like Jack Dorsey, Twitter, all these design CEOs on the side of the spectrum where they've created like these incredible companies. But I think there's a lot of designers on that spectrum on all ends of it who are doing really interesting things. Maybe they're not creating one of the largest companies in the world. Maybe they're just creating some really cool tool and it's like a creative outlet. And so, my background in that is I'll kind of set the stage, I guess, and then we're going to dive in. I'll introduce you guys. But for me, it's 2015. I'm in San Francisco. This is the first time I've ever been to San Francisco. So I'm visiting San Francisco for TwitchCon, which is a convention. It's the first ever convention hosted by Twitch.tv, where they got all their creators together, and we were there as vendors. Now, we were stupid broke, and we being myself and two co-founders. We were so broke, but one of my co-founders made like a really fantastic connection, and we kind of piggybacked on their their venue that they had at this thing. And so we get there, we land, my wife calls me, and she's like, hey, our car broke down and it's a $3,000 engine fix. I'm broke. I've got 4 kids. I've been working on this tool that we created called Stream Pro for about 8 months. And I was taking client work on at the time too. That was like my main source of income. But I had really neglected a lot of it and let a lot of client contracts like end and didn't renew anything. And so like we land and I'm walking around. We're eating sub sandwiches from Walgreens because we just didn't have. It was expensive. It was a reality check for us. And I go to the back of the hotel that we were staying at. I think we were like the Hilton or the Marriott. I can't remember which one, but it was like for the venue. And I just started crying, man, because I was like, what am I doing? Like we were there, we were going to pitch Stream Pro, and we were going to try to get some users, but we had no money plan, and I'm like dying. And so finally, like after 30 minutes, I collect myself. My co-founders are like supporting me, and they're like, well, we're here. Like, let's just make the most of it. We'll deal with all the other things, once this is over. And fast forward literally 4 weeks later, we end up selling this company. It's a 7-figure acquisition to a Sequoia-backed company. Today it's known as Streamlabs.
Nice.
And it changed my life, man. It changed my life in a huge way. And it all started because I started tinkering on the side while I've got my design freelancing going. I'm working for like design agencies. And I just start like tinkering on the side with little ideas. And a lot of those failed. And then one just like, we got lucky. It worked really well. Boom. And the rest is history. And so, that's really where my passion comes from. And I see UXTools, for example. And UXTools, by the way, is awesome. When I first ran into UXTools, there's a lot of conversations on the web now, especially ever since like Sketch broke on scene and then Figma and everybody else. It's like, which one's better, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like you guys actually have captured a pretty interesting way of both categorizing the like evolution of design tools. Now we've got so many, but also presenting like what seem to be the trends. And so like, and obviously with Adobe acquiring Figma recently, there's going to be some interesting stuff to kind of talk about around that. But anyway, success leaves clues. I think it's really interesting. And I want to hear from you guys. What was kind of the starting point for UXTools?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started UXTools about 6 years ago, and it actually started as a basic table of I kid you not, an HTML table comparing tools with like X's and check marks. And I made it. I like bought this domain, UXTools.co. You mentioned buying a domain. First leader to success. Obviously, I'm joking. But I had this domain. I threw it up there, and I put it in a Medium post I was writing about prototyping tools. That's it. And not really expecting anything to come from it, but I like coding and making stuff. And it got hunted on Product Hunt, I think by one of the early community managers on Product Hunt at the time. And I got like this huge influx of traffic I was not ready for. Totally missed the boat on that, but basically knew that I had some sort of product market fit. And so thought that was fun, thought it would just kind of be this side outlet. And eventually started picking up little things along the way. One of those was the design tool survey that I started running at the end of each year to kind of get more community input on tools and what people were using. And then fast forward a few years, me and Jordan bump into each other on the World Wide Web. We have never met in person. So Jordan and I only know each other from the chest up. And I met Jordan. He was doing some pretty cool stuff in the space. He was another creator. We had a lot of similar ideas and overlap. I'll let him kind of introduce what he was working on and how he was doing that. And yeah, we've been working together now for almost 2 years.
Yeah, so I was making something called Learn UXD. It was just like content, like design content. And so I wrote an article about one of the surveys that Taylor put out. And then I guess he saw it and he must have liked the article because he reached out to me and he was like, hey, why don't we get together on this? Yeah, exactly. Love you. And so I think he was making like really cool design resources for the community. And I was on the content side. And so putting our heads together and kind of going under the umbrella of UXTools, since that already had some clout, we decided to kind of join forces and do something together.
That's awesome. And the power, like truly, as I've really leaned into publishing content over the past 2 years, I understand there's a level of cynicism to how many like thought leaders are out there and maybe low quality content that's getting published, and the guru thing. But on the other side of it, for people that are really putting their voice out there and really trying to publish like what they've learned to date, a lot of things around that, like look at the connection that it led to the two of you. I just wanted to pause and highlight that for a second for designers of all stages. I mean, you know, if you're publishing content, you don't have to come out and try to be an expert if you don't feel like you know everything around an area. You can just capture what you're learning right now or what you're working on and just kind of anecdotally share that. So I just want to encourage people, put more content out there, try it, give it a try. It's a great way to like segue into a side gig. Go ahead.
Yeah, oh, sorry, Taylor, go ahead.
No, Jordan, please.
So I just want to second that. I don't think that the only reason you put out content is to be a thought leader. Like I have learned so much myself from having to research and then put out content, right? Like it didn't come from me necessarily. I had to research it out and then put it out there for the web to see. So I think there are lots of reasons to write content besides just trying to become a thought leader and sell a course.
Yeah.
Oh, please, Tommy.
I was going to say there's an image I've seen and it's like, you know, when you think about a topic, it's water falling through the hand. And then the other one is, you know, when you actually go to write it down, whether you publish it publicly or you just write it in a journal, it's water in a glass. And I love that kind of visual metaphor.
I think one of the things that has been important for us at UXTools and certainly important for me, like I don't really have any interest in being like a thought leader or an influencer or anything like that. And a lot of the stuff that you'll see me and Jordan making are value first. So nothing that we have done has been like a quick cash grab or just like a way to get followers or anything like that. Like we have tried to instill as much value as we possibly can into everything that we make. And for years, we've just made free resources, right? Just free stuff for the community, free content, free tutorials, free videos, free survey data, you know, podcasts, all that stuff. And so it's really, I think, born out of like a passion and an interest that we have both as creators and also as learners, to just kind of keep learning, keep sharing, and just keep that loop going, right? I don't think either of us would claim to be, you know, to know the most about design or anything like that, but instead kind of be arbiters of information and tools and try and help everyone else level up as well and create a sense of community over like an ivory tower for ourselves. And so, you know, as we talk about being like finding side projects, creating side hustles and things like that, I think about what value you can contribute, right? What can you give back? And how can you help others and figure out a way to create something around that, not just like make a quick buck or rise to the top, but instead like how can you really make something that is worth something?
And that's why I tell people, you know, starting your own product of sorts, whether it's a content product or a tool or anything of that nature, is a really fantastic way to exercise, you know, your design decision making. How should I be investing my time here, not investing my time on this thing? Am I wasting too much resources thinking about this pattern? I think when you really start to, especially if it's tied to your livelihood, which I'm not sure if UXTools is, and we'll get into that in just a second, but especially when you have to start making decisions where it's like this thing might die or not, that'll really fireproof, I think, some of your design decision making. UXTools, let's break it down. Like, what are your numbers? Where are things right now? What are you willing to share?
So we're kind of all over the place. Sometimes I think we need to focus a little bit more, but we have a newsletter that's got, I think it's coming up on 17,000 subscribers.
Nice.
We have, what is it, Taylor? Like we're at like 50,000 total social followers or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we just passed like 60. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So we're on, I mean, we're on Twitter, LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, though we're not very active there anymore. We're kind of focusing more for probably the next year or so on YouTube. We have like, I think it's coming up on 3,000 subscribers there. So we're kind of all over the place. That
is awesome. And so is the goal, obviously the first goal, it sounds like, Taylor, is you guys want to really put this out there and add the value. You went from just being a survey to having a lot of resources for, I think, like you had, what was it called? You had like research based, like use these methods for different things. Tell me a little bit about, I think Taylor froze a little. I think we have the, I want to take a picture of Taylor's face here because this is awesome. Here, I just screen capped that. I'm going to send that to him later. I don't know if Taylor's still with us right now, but Jordan, maybe you can answer this. What are some of the things that you guys, there we go. Nice. Welcome back. I took a screenshot of your face and it looked wonderful, by the way.
Maybe one day when I'm a very lucrative design creator, I can afford internet that never goes out.
Yeah. Well, what I was asking was, coming from surveys, going to the resources that you've offered about how to do different like research methods. Now you're doing like teardowns on YouTube, which I think is awesome. What's kind of the end goal, or like what's at least the next 12 to 16 month like milestones you guys are excited about?
Yeah, like the goal is definitely to keep growing, to keep finding things that work. As Jordan mentioned, like we can always stand to focus a little more, but I think the past 12 months have certainly been about experimentation. We started a podcast and then we canceled the podcast, and then we started an interview series and then we canceled the interview series, and then we've tried a bunch of different stuff, which hopefully we'll be bringing the podcast back. We can talk a little bit more about that. So I think the next 12 to 16 months are figuring out like what's working and where to invest. And so we also launched a course about a month or two ago to try our hand at that. And so we're really trying to see where there's smoke and then go find the fire, right? And keep that working. I think Jordan and I would love to find some sort of future where UXTools is making enough money that it could potentially be a primary source of income for us. That's certainly not the case now. Right now, we're just working way too much and making not enough for how much we're working. And we hope to flip the scales on that here pretty soon.
Yeah. So is it tough to, because I mean, you're both, if I'm not mistaken, like director or lead roles right now. How are you balancing that?
It's tough. Like I got 4 kids like you, Tommy. So we try to stay really organized with how we do UXTools. We have an enormous Notion database that's like full of ideas, and we try to stay really organized about what our goals are and what our tasks are and splitting things up. I think that's absolutely essential, obviously. it's essential for me personally to be really organized. So like I use Todoist. I use a calendar. I try to stay extremely organized. And I think, but what's nice is that when you're doing content that's about your job, it plays off of each other really, really well. So like I do things every day at my job that I'm like, oh, I could talk about that at UXTools. And then sometimes I just pause and write it down. So, I think there's some synergy there, but it definitely, like, it's a sacrifice, like there are some hobbies that I've kind of given up because, this UXTools is my hobby right now.
Right.
So, there's some sacrifice. So yeah, I would say just keeping organized and letting the synergy play off of each other.
What's your tech stack? Like, what tools are you guys using to make the entire thing run? Front of house, back of house?
Let's see most of our Notion is certainly the backbone of it, I would say. We use Twist as kind of our personal communication, just me and Jordan. We've been using that since day one. Twist is like a Slack competitor. But much more organized and easier to follow. Let's see, we use Calendly, to find guests, get people scheduled. We use Figma for design. Jordan and I code everything that we make. So we're running our site off of Jekyll and Vue.js currently.
Nice.
And I'm trying to think, we paid for a bunch of other stuff too. Where's all our money going? Podia, so this is what we use to launch the course. Jordan's been doing a lot of video editing on what's it called? Resolve. We did Premiere Pro for a while. We're just all over the place.
I love talking tech stacks for like side gigs. Like, what are you using for like ConvertKit? Notion, all these different tools. I geek out on that. ConvertKit.
We use ConvertKit. We love it a lot. We use Plausible for analytics, for website analytics, for Twitter. So I don't know if you've had any use of Riverside before, but we've used Riverside a couple times and it's kind of like burned us a few times. So we're looking at this other kind of beta product called Remotely, but it seems to work really well. So
yeah, I've heard a lot. Riverside's been getting a lot of hype, and I started using StreamYard for these live streams. And now that I'm going to be putting this on as an audio podcast as well, like Riverside looked interesting, but it's interesting to hear that it burned you. I'm nervous about, like, once you get into an operation with a tool, like you kind of don't want to mess with it. Like, even if it's, that's kind of at least where I'm at. But with tools, specifically with UX tools, and you guys started doing surveys and seeing a lot of the trends that were coming out. I mean, I have strong opinions about what tools I think work, how much should we care about certain tools, where I think they're going. What about you guys? I mean, do you care? Do you have a bias? Like, when you're looking at the survey results, let's kind of talk about the survey. Like, where do you get the results from? What have been some interesting insights, and like, what are your biases tell you?
Yeah, I'll answer a quick question here. I see in the comments of where to find the teardown videos. Jordan just started those on our YouTube channel. I think it's just youtube.com/UXTools, if I'm not mistaken, but you can find our channel there. So the survey is pretty interesting. The survey has grown almost entirely organically. So we make the survey, we curate kind of a list of tools, usually informed by the previous year's answers, and then any new tools that we've seen come out in the year. And it almost all of the answers just come from organic sharing. So we'll throw it up on like Reddit and Designer News, LinkedIn, Twitter, and then just kind of let it go. And we ask people to share it with their teams, share it with their colleagues, share it around. And, every year we'll get probably around 4,000 to 5,000 responses. And then we just do all the analysis of that, CSV spreadsheet style, like counting, calculating, mathing, and crank the results out. And excited to try it. Speaking of tools, excited to try a new tool this year as well, which is Tally. We'll be making the survey on Tally. If you haven't checked it out, I'll be making a video about it soon. But it's basically like if Notion was made just for forms. I think it's tally.so. And it's super, super easy to use, really flexible, really fun to use as well. And I think our philosophy on tools, I I think Jordan and I are certainly opinionated on tools. You just heard us rattle off a bunch of tools that we use and care about. But I think as far as how we represent ourselves to our community and to the design community, we try and play a more neutral role, because we recognize kind of the responsibility that we have in sharing this, I think, important data set every year that like 120, 150,000 people come to view from us every year. And we feel like it's important to express that as neutrally as possible, not to try and push the most popular tools or trendy tools or tools that we like, but instead to offer people information that they can use and kind of better their own design education, or maybe find the right tools for their team. And we have to be really careful with that, especially when sometimes, companies are paying us several $1,000s to sponsor that information. And we really want to stress that like they have no control in the survey, and that we do not change the survey at all based on their involvement or any of the tools that we use. So opinionated, but try our best to play a neutral party.
No, and I love that. And out of curiosity, how has the survey evolved? Right, I think the first survey you ever published was it 2016 or 17?
17, I think, yeah.
17. And now you've got categories, and I would argue there's probably even some categories like now with tools like Loom or Descript, which like help us with async communication. Like how far where do you set your limits? Because you could probably take this survey like super far. Like, what are you using for note taking?
Yeah, it's like, what browser are you using? I don't know. What text messaging client are you using? Like we could go really far. We've actually taken some categories off as well that haven't performed very well. And so we kind of try and spin up and spin down categories as they perform. So for example, if we try a new category and nobody answers it, or if there's only like one tool and everybody answers the same tool, then we'll probably put out the data for that, and then we'll wind it down the next year because the results just aren't very interesting. It's not worth getting 5,000 people to answer that question if we don't get interesting answers. And so I think we're obviously pretty focused on the like UX and product design side of things. So something that we think a product designer might be using in their day-to-day is what interests us. So something note-taking, if it's like Notion versus Evernote, or something that's pretty general, like anybody who works on a computer could use those. We try to be a little bit more narrow and focused than that. I don't know if, Jordan, you have any other philosophies around that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have anything to add. I think I do think I want to point out though that it's really interesting to look back at the data and see how much turnover has happened with even just like the main UI design tool that people use. I mean, so it's kind of funny to see the reaction with that context. Like it was literally 2 or maybe 3 years ago that Figma overtook Sketch.
Yeah,
that is an extremely fast turnaround. So it doesn't when you look at it in the historical context, it doesn't really surprise me that that Figma is maybe on a different path now. Like this is a continually evolving industry, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the future. But I don't think you can pigeonhole yourself into one tool. That's kind of one of the lessons that I've taken away from the survey over the years.
Where do you see Canva falling in the mix of things?
Canva's doing all kinds of stuff. They're doing things. I mean, they're in like docs now. Like they're doing and video editing and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I don't like, really. I wonder if it's going to be enterprise level or like it's obviously they very much cater to SMB, like solo creators. I'm wondering if that's going to translate to the enterprise side. Oh, I've got so many questions around tooling over the next 5 to 10 years, guys. Like, what do you think? What do you think's next? Like, what's going to shake up the industry?
I do think Canva is really fascinating because they're basically bringing like really simple tools to like the Instagram generation, right? Like it's just like drag it, slap a sticker on there, like that's almost their approach to graphic design, and it's beautifully simple, and they've made some really amazing tools that way. I imagine they could translate that to enterprise pretty easily just by making enterprise licenses available and giving the power of those creation tools to several people within a company, and kind of bundling things up that way. As far as where I see things going right now, I think I've heard you say a little bit about this as well, Tommy, but I think there's going to be a consolidation play. I certainly think that like the design tooling industry has just been really chaotic over the past several years, right? Like tools start, tools stop. When I started the survey, it was because there were like 60 competing prototyping tools, and 60 is not an exaggerated number. Like I have the list of tools, and and it was just this very crazy market. Saw a lot of companies, go under at that point. And I think now we're seeing these kind of mega tools rise up, and I would love to see them push in both directions, right? You've got Framer that's taking the design and pushing it into like production code. And then you have other tools like, Quant UX, and I think there's been a couple of other ones that I've seen. Maze is doing a good job of this, but actually taking the design and pulling it back into research, right? And so you have these tools kind of pulling in both directions of like, let's take it back to the data and the insights, or pulling it forward, let's take it into the code and in the actual product. So I could see a world where a tool is able to actually weave all of that together, and like a designer takes a problem to a solution from start to finish within some sort of suite of tools or some sort of ecosystem, which is like the dream, right? I can see it far out on the horizon. We're not quite there yet, but I'd love to see something like that happen.
Dan Mall said something interesting when I had him on a few weeks ago, which was, we were talking about design systems. And I think design systems, when that gets cracked both on the production line and in the tooling, is going to change this role a lot. That's kind of what I think will happen, right? I'll elaborate on that at some other point. But he mentioned something like, we haven't figured out round tripping, he called it, which I love. That is just like a product name, like round trip or something, which is this idea of the designer contributing to the design, but the engineer making changes or contributing to the development in a way that actually changes the design in real time as well. So this like collaborative space. And to me, there's some intersection there around like no code tooling. Are you guys considering introducing no code as like a category in future surveys, or does that maybe not? Is that a little separate from what you're looking at?
I think the no code space is really interesting. I think that it's still maturing on the design side. I don't know if I've given it heavy thought for our survey specifically, though I think it is a really interesting category. I think right now where you'll see designers using a lot more no code stuff is for like their portfolio, or maybe making landing pages and stuff like that. I think I see a little bit less of like pushing actual production code, but that doesn't mean that that's not a possibility. Framer is certainly growing really rapidly in that area. Webflow took the world by storm, with this meteoric rise in kind of a very Figma-like way. We've actually been made aware of a couple of tools as well. Like UXPin is making this really fascinating play where you can actually like link up a Git repository and pull components in and design with them, which is like mind-bending and awesome. Another tool just reached out to us called Judo, which actually creates like, you pull out components like server-side components, and then you can ship it into an app package, like to the app store, so that like design can own one part of the app and engineering can own the other. So you could just own like onboarding and slip your components in there. So there's this like really crazy world developing out there. And I think it's hard to like focus and organize it right now because it's so broad. But certainly a lot of cool stuff happening there. I don't know if Jordan, you may have seen some other cool examples.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if it's going to eventually be in the same form that it is right now, but I see there's some principles from no code that I think will make their way into enterprise software. Like, for example, with Judo, the designers having more control and being able to ship to production, immediately to production right away without the use of an engineer. So, but, we're still going to obviously need engineers. So I think there's some principles of no code that will eventually make their way into enterprise. I don't know if like Webflow itself will be used in enterprise product design soon, other than for like marketing sites and stuff like that.
It's why Framer is really interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I think I connected Framer. I was just tinkering around a year or two ago, and I connected Framer to a little React local dev environment. There was like a plugin I pulled in where I could make changes in Framer, and they would immediately reflect as my React component in my browser. And I was like, that's slick. That's slick with interaction heavy everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. And I think there's a case to be made here too while we're talking about this, that, you know, we're talking about basically UI design for the most part here. But if you think about all of the tools that you use as a product designer, like you know, UI design is just one small piece of it. Like we're talking about whiteboarding tools and like handoff, and, you know, there's lots of tools for design systems. And we added, I think, 2 categories this past year for recruiting, for research recruiting, and for your research repository, like where you keep your research. So that's one of the areas that I think is going to kind of probably explode. Like it's bound to get larger as more and more companies out there adopt research. You know, the whole research tool industry is growing a lot. You look at tools like Dovetail or Maze, like Taylor mentioned earlier. I mean, I think there's a lot of room to grow there. And just the fact that research is being adopted in so many companies, that will reflect itself in the tooling.
I could talk about tools all day. I love this space. I love where it's going. Listen, I built my career years ago on pirated Photoshop. I'll admit it. I did.
Oh, yeah.
Back before they had like the subscription model. I could not afford $2,500 like whatever the cost was at the time, some crazy, you know, amount of money. And like I was building UI in Photoshop. And so when Sketch landed, it like blew my mind. Because I was like trying to make balsamic mock-ups work in between for a while. And I was like, I guess this kind of conveys it. That way I don't have to do high fidelity in Photoshop until I absolutely need to. But anyway, so that was like my experience. Love Sketch, still team Sketch, just for the record. And interested to see what Apple does with Freeform, their whiteboarding tool they're releasing with iOS 16, I think, right? That just came out or is coming out soon.
I think the whiteboarding, well, I think COVID and like the remote work revolution just blew the whiteboarding industry wide open. So you have like dozens and dozens, and I've seen new ones, I kid you not, within like the last 2 weeks, Canva being one of them. And so that space is just really going crazy. And I imagine the same thing will happen where we'll get this huge band of competitors and then we'll narrow down and we'll have like 3 or 4 really strong ones that kind of survive. But anyway, just wanted to say I've seen the same trends.
Well, let me flip this into the other direction here. So UXTools is obviously got a great brand around it now. And I know that you guys are doing some really cool things that you just talked about, that you're like directions you're taking it. Has this been kind of your first side gig, side project? Have you had others in the past that worked or didn't work? Like what's been, you know, your individual experiences with creating something?
Man, you remember like back, it was probably almost 10 years ago when everyone was blogging and like trying to make money off of blogging. I was like so in that world. I like had a blog, and I think it was about marketing, because that's what I graduated in. That's the type of stuff that I like. So like I had this blog where I was going to make a course and everything. I was totally in that world. And you know, there've been things along the way since then that I've made. I mean, like Instagram accounts and just like trying to launch little tiny one-off products is involved in the same type of world. She makes stuff all the time. So like I've been involved in making stuff online for at least 10 years, probably.
I'm very much the opposite. I kind of used to scoff at like hustle culture and like the entrepreneurial, you know, like vibe, and never really wanted to be that person. Was never interested in like owning my own company, starting my own business, none of it. And kind of the origin story I told you about UXTools. So I was like, I made this thing, put it in a blog post, and then it sort of took off, and I've just sort of been like holding on to it ever since as it just continues to grow. And so fortunately I have Jordan, who is very interested and very skilled with a lot of that. And I can kind of ride his coattails a little bit, and I'll just keep making stuff. And Jordan is very organized and really business savvy. So we make a good pairing in that way.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I just wanted to add that for me, I'm currently in the middle of kind of a solopreneurship journey, right? And there's pros and cons to it. But for the most part, in my previous ventures, having a co-founder or one or two has been huge. I mean, it's there's trade-offs on both sides, but just like listen, this thing gets lonely and it gets tough, and you like start to doubt yourself. And having somebody else who both has like complementary skills, who can carry a part of the weight that you don't have to worry about, that's it. If you can find that, it's so big.
Yeah, I'll be honest. So Taylor reached out to me first. He reached out to me when we first met, and he was trying to say, why don't we think about like joining forces? And my immediate reaction was like, no way, dude. I'm not joining with anybody. I'm like totally solo. I don't want to deal with a partner.
The lone wolf mentality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I thought about it a little more and finally decided that we should join. And man, it has been like probably one of the best decisions I've ever made with anything to do with my job. Like, Taylor, working with Taylor's awesome just by himself. He kind of, he doesn't give himself enough credit. He has awesome ideas, and we join forces, and we come up with some great ideas together. But just the idea of having a co-founder with you that you can bounce ideas off of, that you have accountability to, is huge. I mean, if I had just like taken the reins of UXTools by myself a few years ago, I guarantee you it would not still be running today. Like just the fact that Taylor has partnered with me and we're working on this together has been a huge deal. And we're running so strong.
These things are marathons, and having someone that you can like tag team with and like catch your breath while somebody else kind of like can go a couple miles, and then that sometimes is so critical. Like I've had moments of burnout, moments of one reason or another where it's like I just can't show up this week as strong as I did last week. Having a co-founder, a co-creator is huge. Someone in the comments asked if this will be recorded. This is recorded on YouTube. These are going out actually on Spotify and other areas of podcasts in the next week. And by the way, we'll be answering questions in the last 10 to 15 minutes. If you start putting those in now, we have someone capturing that. We'll get to those soon. So go ahead, Taylor.
Just wanted to plus one everything that's been said. Like the way I used to run UXTools before I met Jordan is that I would like cram for like 8 weeks building the survey, getting all the data ready, and then just majorly burn out and then not touch UXTools for like 6 months. And then it would be time to get ready for the next survey, and it'd be like, all right, let's get out and do this thing. And so there have been a lot of times like I don't know if behind the scenes people really know just how limited of time like me and Jordan have. And often it's like down to the wire, the night before where we're trying to publish something or launch something or announce something. And so it's awesome being able to pass something off as well. Like, here's my to-do list. What of this can you take? Right. And the other person's able to like pull out several tasks and just get going. And we have pushed so many things across the finish line that way. And anybody who's interested in, creating anything, whatever that might be, even just starting a little website or maybe starting their own company. I do think looking for someone that has a different but complementary skill set to you is super vital. Jordan and I got lucky in that we both have technical skills. I'll jump into this in a second, but we both have technical skills and we both have design skills, and we've been able to pull on those in different directions and use them for many different projects. So we can both jump in. We can edit live code on the site. We can engineer various things and make them happen. And we also both have a good design sense. What I was going to say is that it is wild that Jordan and I, from the moment of contact to when we signed a 50-50 contract on UXTools, was like 72 hours. And we knew almost nothing about each other. And we lucked out so hard. Like,
we did.
We totally did. Yeah. We both have so many talents and skills and like hidden things that we didn't know about the other person that I cannot believe I did not even ask about them. Foolish decision. I would never do it again in that way. But so glad that we eventually matched up.
Well, and so finding someone who's competent and that you can trust is a huge part of this. I mean, getting in a business or any kind of venture with someone is like a marriage. Like for me, it's we got to go through like a dating phase, and we've got to really like, are we going to do this? But the other side of it that I find to be difficult for me personally is sharing a vision with someone else, especially if, for example, like Taylor, you approached Jordan and essentially had to like sell Jordan, I imagine, to some degree, that, hey, I've got this vision for this thing I could really use help on. Jordan, how do you come into that and like say, you know what, like I could see myself feeling like a co-author to this vision that has existed before I got here?
Yeah, the cool thing about Taylor and I is that we both had the same vision, and we were going about it in different ways. And that's I think what Taylor noticed before he even contacted me, is that we both had the same vision. We were utilizing different skills and different resources to go about it. And his pitch was more like, we have the same vision. Let's come together and work on the same vision together. So, and I think that's probably how a lot of good co-founders partnerships happen. There isn't one pulling the other one along with them, like behind. They both understand what they're aiming for, and they both have the skills and the motivation to work towards that.
Has UXTools made you guys better designers, do you think?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
In what ways?
I think, like I said, I mean, from creating content, like you said earlier, Tommy, you know, there's a whole different world when you're teaching someone something versus when you're actually doing it. And so I've had to really double down on my skills to be able to teach other people. So, you know, that's one of the main reasons that I feel like I've become a better designer.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the various skills that something like this exposes you to. I've spent most of my career in SaaS, and so kind of on cross-functional teams, and usually deeply embedded within like the product side of the organization. So running something like UXTools, it's very hands-on, like how to run a business, how to grow a following, how to run a social account, how to consistently create high-quality content, how to be a good interviewer, how to create like high quality video and audio productions. You know, there's so many diverse things that designers can learn. And like, do those always come back to benefit, you know, my product design career? Maybe not directly, but I've used almost all of those skills in various capacities. And someone in the, on YouTube actually just asked what skills we've discovered in each other. And I think one of the main things that I've learned from Jordan is just like the benefits of having a really strong plan, like an action plan, and timing that out. And so I think we've really benefited from that level of organization that I never had in myself. And it was really great to learn that from Jordan along the way. And I think I've improved a lot of my planning skills in that way. But, and also just knowing that like we can trust each other to get in and edit like, you know, the CSS framework that Jordan has created and a lot of the underlying code that we have in there. Many designers say they can code, and really it's kind of a mess. You know, they know like basic, very surface level CSS, that sort of thing. But Jordan and I are both like very deep into front end code, and is something that I probably should have asked about before we joined up, but we lucked out and things are going well. But that's to say that I've certainly taken a lot of skills back with me to my career for sure.
What would you say to somebody who's a designer right now? They've got some ideas. Maybe they feel like they don't have enough time, or they don't really know where to start, but they have something they want to create. And maybe like, never mind if their ambitions are to make it a giant company, but they're just like, I want to create a thing. What would you tell someone?
Well, there's the whole MVP framework, right? Like you put something out that you think scratches an itch, but is the absolute stripped down version of the solution. You know, maybe instead of making a whole website, you just make like a Notion document and publish it. So I think, and we try to do that a little bit at UXTools. We try to experiment with things like Taylor talked about earlier. Sometimes we go probably past the MVP. We like full on make the whole thing and then see how it performs. But I think there's something to be said about experimenting. You don't have to make something huge in order to put it out there. Like if it has genuine value, people are going to find it and start using it and tell other people about it.
Completely agree.
The analogy or metaphor that I've heard that was reintroduced to me by co-founder of Builder.io, a friend of mine, Steve, and he says, sometimes you've just got to burn a couple pancakes, right? and this, he was reminding me of this because I've been getting stuck on a few things. It's funny, like we know the MVP framework, and even having been through it multiple times over, when we get really passionate about an idea or a project, we want to just go deep into it and take the craftsperson angle and make it beautiful, make it great. But sometimes you just have to burn a few pancakes. And I'll have people say, like, when do I know that I should move on from my job? Well, that's to focus on the thing I've been working on. And there's a lot of variables that go into that. And the biggest one being, like, can you support yourself? But the other one too is, I'd say, like, if you're working somewhere and you have an idea, like, burn a few pancakes while you're still with the place you're working. You know what I mean? Just get those bad pancakes out of the way so that you can start to figure out, like, what are some of the, like, better looking pancakes? What are those going to look like? And the faster you can get to that, get those nasty pancakes out of the way, I think the better you'll be. Hey, Freddie, how are we doing on questions?
Got a few. Could always use some more.
Got a few questions. So if you've got some questions for us on this topic, feel free to pop them in. In the next 5 minutes here, we'll answer a few of those. But the biggest thing that I would ask you guys is, when might UXTools become your full-time thing? Is that ever in the cards? Have you thought about that? Are you kind of okay with, like, the where it's at now? Like, and you enjoy that?
I do not enjoy where it's at now. No, mostly what I say is I feel like I'm working 2 jobs. And what I say is I look forward to the day when I can work 1 job. So if anyone's listening and wants to buy UXTools for, like $5 million, that would be great. Alternatively, if there's a way to help UXTools go full time, I think we would love to explore that as well. And I don't think, we have some sort of hard, fast timeline on that. I think, like, the growth of UXTools will help us dictate that. Jordan might have kind of a different perspective there as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have some, like, revenue numbers that we're trying to hit. Basically, we want to get relatively close to our current jobs before we jump off into solo land. But that's because, we're in our 30s. We're both married, have kids and stuff. So we just feel like at this point in our careers, in our lives, we'd rather have a solid foundation before we jump off, probably. So we're testing, forms of revenue. Like, one of the things that we recently tested is the course, like Taylor mentioned earlier. And we have a few ideas for the future that I think will probably pan out well. But again, it's the experimentation, right? I think we're going to try to be a little more agile and test things out before we go all in on things. But
how's the course doing? What have been the lessons learned so far?
Man,
so many.
The lessons are many. Yeah. So again, like we said, the course is an experiment. When me and Jordan first met, I had amassed a bunch of information and ideas and things I had learned about portfolios. And I was like, hey man, I think I'm going to make an ebook. And then Jordan and I joined up and we were like, yeah, let's set that aside. We're going to come do this other stuff. And so when it came time for us to experiment with the course, we kind of dusted it off and said, well, look, we've got all this content sitting over here, right? It had been like multiple years that I had been writing down things I learned from design interviews, from interviewing designers, from following other design creators, right? Just this huge wealth of information. And so we thought, well, some courses take a long time to make. Like, people can spend years developing course curriculums, right? We said, well, this is our nights and weekends. We don't want to spend time doing that. And so what we decided to do was take that information and transfer it into a course in the most efficient way possible. So we did no pre-marketing. We did not create any sort of drip campaigns. Like, we did not do anything to get the word out, basically, until it was out. And then we were like, we made a course. And so we didn't expect a huge explosive response to that. And there was not one, but we've been interested to see putting that on our site, which has some really strong SEO, we have really strong organic traffic, and trying to understand what we can do by monetizing like lead magnets and things like that. Again, this is an experiment for us. We're learning a lot from it. I'm sure there's still a lot to learn in terms of like pricing and packaging and positioning and all of that. And so I think we have a long laundry list of things we would do differently if we were to launch a next course, and also still in discussions about, if courses are right for us based on the time we've allotted and kind of the community that we have. Any other kind of insights, Jordan?
Yeah, one of the other reasons that, and you touched on this, Taylor, but one of the other reasons that we, excuse me, course is specifically because we have a lot of SEO traffic going to our UX challenges on the website. Like thousands of people every month. So like we wanted to leverage that in some way. And this is something that you can think about when you're a creator. What is already working for you really well. We have a couple backbones to UXTools. We have the survey and the challenges brings in a lot of traffic every month. Those are two examples. So how instead of looking at what's the next thing, how can you look at what you already have and leverage that? So one of the big ideas with the portfolio course is that, hey, these are probably early junior designers who probably also really need some help with their portfolio. So we're going to make this portfolio course that we already have basically all of the content for, and try to funnel all of the traffic that Google is giving us for free into this portfolio course and try to convert some of those into some form of revenue. So I think that's one of my takeaways. Make sure that you leverage what you already have.
I love that. Well, with the last 10 minutes here, let's answer a couple of questions. Freddie, hit us.
Sure. Our first question comes from YouTube. Ashley wants to know, and I believe this question is directed towards Jordan and Taylor, what are some of the skills that you were able to identify within one another?
Yeah, Taylor mentioned already a couple, and some of the things that were revealed to me right away about Taylor were that we knew we kind of coded before, but Taylor is all into like Vue.js, and he's deep into front end stuff. It's not just I can put an HTML document together, So that was a really nice surprise for us. And also Taylor is extremely good at illustration of all things. So like he I think, didn't you graduate in graphic design, or you at least study graphic design, Taylor?
Yeah, my degree is in graphic design.
Yeah. So there's all these little skills that were just revealed to us over time. And I don't think that's because we're like some superhumans or something. Everyone has their own skills, and you'll probably discover that with your co-founder, whoever it happens to be.
Great question.
Our next question comes from LinkedIn from Suhail. What technology/skills do you predict will help product designers to future-proof themselves?
Oh boy, I'm just gonna start dropping buzzwords: metaverse, augmented reality. No, obviously, it's hard. It's hard to predict the future, right? There is currently like both a revolution and a crash going on around like blockchain and crypto, and an extremely volatile market that will likely settle and turn into something more stable. But I do think that I do think that there's an interesting world for designers. I don't think that like the internet and web and phones are going anywhere, but I do think there will be new avenues that will open up. And so like I think there's a very interesting world for designers in VR and AR and things like that. I think 3D design, as it becomes more simple, you may have followed a few tools like Spline, and there are a couple of other ones as well that have made 3D design much more accessible to designers. And I think we'll continue to see a simplification of tools, kind of the Canva-ing of many different industries. And I hope that makes design more accessible to a lot of people as well. But I'd be interested to hear from Tommy and Jordan as well.
I think design systems are going to really change the industry a lot, but we still have work to do there. So if you get into design, it kind of depends. Are you working at an agency, a small business? Are you working in a large production line? But I think at least for web and for mobile, we're hitting a ceiling of interaction patterns, right? And there's new ways that we can do stuff still that will continue to make its rounds. But for the most part, like an e-commerce checkout flow is an e-commerce checkout flow, and there's a couple variations. And I don't think we are as interested as an industry in reinventing some of those wheels. And so I think design system tooling is going to create eventually a dictionary, right? We're going to be looking at some of the top performing design systems that really are thoughtful, whether it's like Material or Gusto's Workbench and all the ones that are coming out still. But they're going to be like the dictionaries, and eventually there's going to be the ability to pull from these dictionaries. Like I need some sort of progressive disclosure pattern for drilling into 3 layers of data relationships, right? And it's like, okay, well, here are 5 ways to do that. And as designers, like we're not reinventing those ways. We're just finding the one that fits the best. And I think that's how the design role is eventually going to change. It's going to be a lot less about like designing the button and more about finding the appropriate pattern from a dictionary that exists of known patterns and applying that pattern in the use case that you need to use it. And so it's going to speed up design, but it's going to allow us as designers to focus more on like the holistic approach to the problem than like sitting in Sketch or Figma and designing, things out. And that might still be like 10 years out, but I think that's where it's eventually going to go. Because one day, if you look at like GitHub's Copilot, it's not replacing engineers, but it is providing a scaffolding approach that speeds up and engineers use that. And I think the same will happen for designers.
Yeah, I agree. And something to keep in mind that goes along with what both of you guys said is there are some principles of how you do product design that I think will last for a long time. So just as one example, I think that basing your design on some form of user research is extremely important. And, like we talked about earlier, that the tech industry is starting to realize that. And so there are a lot more user research jobs out there and teams. And I think if you don't know how to do these basic principles that apply no matter what you're designing, whether it's 3D or whatever, or if you happen to have a dictionary, like you were talking about, Tommy, if you don't understand these basic principles of how product design works and getting into the user's head and helping them accomplish their task, I don't think you're going to be able to adapt to any of the changes that happen.
Yeah, great question.
Our next question comes from LinkedIn from Otrugo. Thank you for putting this discussion together. I've been looking for a co-founder who can join me so we can run with a patented idea. As a solo entrepreneur, I guess I know that angel donors are not easy to get. Do you guys have any idea how I can fly with my idea or how to get started?
I have ideas. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of coming back to what Jordan said. Like even without funding, without an angel investor, if there is some essence of value that you can create, so you can show others where your interest is and the type of value that you can offer them. And without knowing the idea, it's kind of hard to break that down into its basic component parts. But I do wonder if there's some way to create some amount of value to start offering that right now, right? And you can start building up those connections, that network, those people, those followers, and find out who might be interested in that idea and leverage them when the time comes to maybe take on funding if that's something you need to do.
Yeah, I was just gonna say something similar, or I guess related. If you're talking about going up to VCs or angels and pitching your idea, saying, I have this really awesome idea, I think it's going to work, is a much more difficult pitch to get accepted than I've been working on this idea in my free time for about 6 months. Here's all the traction that we've received. What do you think? An angel is going to look at those 2 different pitches completely differently. So I think you need to think about MVPs in the real world before you just start talking to people about it.
Oh, Chico, I also have a something I want to share with you. So, for example, and I've created a lot of products that have failed or that had early traction and failed. I've created one that did really well, and I'm right in the middle of what I consider my cereal box story. All right, and if you haven't heard the cereal box story, Brian Chesky, Airbnb, before Airbnb became what it was. And I don't have all the details right on this. You look this story up, but essentially, part of how they were generating revenue early on was by literally like repackaging cereal into. I can't remember what the gimmick was on the design of the boxes. They were selling cereal as kind of stepping stones to fund the bigger idea. And so there's a couple lessons in there for me. My cereal boxes is I'm working on an ebook right now that will turn into a course, that will turn into a cohort, and I'm putting a lot of content out there, and there's a lot of cross-pollination happening when I do this. I'm building up an audience where I have channels for distribution. But my end goal is not to have a course. That's going to be part of my contribution, but it's eventually going to be probably a software play for creator tools. And these things I'm creating now are my cereal boxes. Why focus here instead of just going straight to creating a software tool? Well, because there's a lot of research needed to make sure that software tool is right. A software tool is a huge investment, whereas I can write an ebook in a much shorter amount of time, and I can kind of test that and get a quick feedback loop faster than I could maybe writing a piece of software. And so all that to say, there are two things that I've really come to learn that help me when I try to build a new idea. One, it's getting myself incredibly engrossed into the community that I'm trying to build for. Whether that was esports back in the day, Twitch streamers, it's designers and content creators now, incredibly engrossing myself, not just being a passive player in the community, but being an active player in that community, contribute, and really be authentic about how I'm contributing. That will open you up to which ideas are worth spending your time on and finding those little hacks. And then the other piece is, again, burn some pancakes. Just put some stuff together. Try to identify the easiest wins or the easiest things you can create that get you to, you want to learn. If your idea sucks, like you want to increase the speed with which you get to that conclusion. So burn those pancakes, flip them out. This idea sucks. Awesome. Move on to the next thing. Those are the two biggest pieces I would say to focus on first. I think that wraps up our time, guys. Hey, everyone, thank you for joining us. This has been a really fun conversation. I love UX tools. Please check out UXTools.co. The next time you see an argument about which tools to use, this is a pretty great baseline for kind of solving that. But it's also just really insightful and what you guys are building over there on top of just the survey. The resources you're creating, the YouTube channel that you're creating, all of that is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. Stick around for just a second. For the rest of you, I will see you next time on the Zero Content Show. Take care.
Thanks so much, Tommy.
Thanks.